Lasted how long?
9 years, 180 episodes.
You gave it up, right?
I did. So.
They didn't cancel you. You canceled them.
You're not aware of this?
No, I'm asking you.
You think I got canceled? Are you under the impression that I got canceled?
Have I hurt you, Jerry?
I thought that was pretty well documented.
Is this still
CNN?
Don't most shows go down a little?
Most people do also. I went off the air. I was the number one show on television, Larry. Do you know who I am?
Jerry Seinfeld is one of the most recognizable mainstream comedians in history. Actually, scratch that. He is the most recognizable mainstream comedian in history. And his TV show, Seinfeld, is one of the most successful shows in television history in almost every way. Ask him yourself. He'll tell you.
Warren Littlefield wrote that if you would have given him another season of Seinfeld, he would have paid you $110 million for the year. $110 million.
I could have got more than that.
He also did his own version of the talk show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which was probably one of the cringiest shows in TV history. It went for 11 seasons, starting in 2012 and ended in 2019. But I'll come back to that, because I want to introduce you to another guy called Joe Rogan. Okay, you know who Joe Rogan is, and if you don't, you're probably in the wrong place. We know him as the most successful podcaster of all time, in almost every way, and he's also a stand-up comedian.
When he comes, his whole body just erupts.
Fuck, make it stop. Okay, I'll stop screwing around. I have a question for you. If Jerry Seinfeld is the most recognizable comedian in the world, and Joe Rogan is the biggest podcaster in the world, and Seinfeld literally had a show called Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and Rogan always platforms comedians on his podcast, why haven't they been on each other's shows?
The older guys like Leno and Seinfeld, they're so much more zen now. They don't have to Instagram and all that shit.
Yeah,
they don't care. They don't podcast. They don't do any of this shit. They don't do stories and tweets. Yeah. And they seem like I've hung out with Seinfeld. I don't want to say we're buddies, but I've hung out with him a few times because of comedy. And he's like wise, and he does TM, you know, and he doesn't drink, and he's like centered, and he's got a family, and he loves comedy, and he's got his money, and it's just he's a good guy to look up to as a comedian and like a business person.
You like Seinfeld? Like as a stand-up?
Yeah, I'm a big Seinfeld guy.
You don't think he's wildly overrated?
Yeah. I mean, dude, he started in 79. What do you want him to be? Like, I'm sorry he's not your
Eddie.
He was before Eddie. I'm sorry he's not exactly what you want him to be.
He needs to be exactly what I want to be. You know, the OGs I love. Like, I miss that.
Potentially, he's been so famous forever. I think he's like, dude, he's awesome. Like, his specials are doing really good. I mean, created Seinfeld is my favorite show of all time. Like, it's the best show. That's insane.
So overrated,
dude.
Bro.
That's
so overrated.
He's kind of the king.
He's also a billionaire, so you're asking him to not be pretentious when he's a billionaire comedian. He's a comedy.
I know. I'm like harder on him for some reason. Maybe it's because he's so successful. And
you're
what do you?
You're the next New York comic. It's okay.
I'm just like, I don't know. Like
he's like the king, dude. Once Cosby was out, that's the guy.
Really?
But you know what? Inside of the stand-up comedy scene, the Joe Rogan is like the jock side. Remember I was saying this, like there's like, it's mostly white guys in comedy, and it's like two halves. There's the artsy side and there's the jock side, and they kind of beef with each other all the time. Because this Brendan Schaub is an idiot, and basically Joe Rogan just makes him a famous.
Yeah, let's be honest. Brendan Schaub doesn't exist as a comedian without Joe Rogan propping him up.
Useless.
Right?
Such a shit comedian, and his show is whatever. I don't know.
Rogan is the de facto tastemaker, and if you're a comedian, you basically have to kiss his ass. Let's be real about it. Let's be real. Nobody talks trash about Joe Rogan. He's the new Johnny Carson. If you're a comedian and you're on Rogan, you immediately become 10 times more profitable. So everyone wants to be on Papa Rogan.
I think this is one of the most interesting feuds that never happened. It's obvious there's beef there, but there isn't actually any beef. It's really strange. But the bottom line is, Jerry Seinfeld doesn't think Joe Rogan's funny, and I think Joe Rogan wants to be Jerry Seinfeld. Now, before I pull out my receipts and explain exactly what I mean, let me lay out my personal opinions about these guys. Full disclosure. I'll start with Seinfeld. I was a big fan of the show, countless episodes that were absolutely fucking hilarious, well written, good cast, stopped at the right time. Simple. As far as Jerry's stand-up goes, yeah, I guess he's solid. Again, well written, tight structure, good timing. I'm no expert on comedy, but Jerry seems like a funny dude. I wouldn't hang out for one of his specials or go and search for his stand-up on YouTube, but when I do come across it, yeah, look, it's pretty good. Is he in my top 10? No fucking chance. So I think you get the idea. Now, what about Rogan? Big fan of his podcast. I'd listened to most episodes, as you know, and he's actually a pretty funny dude. On his podcast, that is. That's the thing. I've never laughed once, not even a little bit, at his stand-up comedy. Next to Brendan Schaub, he's probably one of the worst famous comedians I've ever seen. I truly don't understand how anyone finds his stand-up even remotely funny. But like I said, in general conversation on his podcast, I've laughed out loud plenty of times. He's genuinely a funny guy. And if you enjoy his stand-up, I don't know, good luck to you. Comedy is completely subjective. So with that out of the way, let me explain where I'm going with this. Tim Dillon was just on JRE and they started talking about Jerry. Take a look.
That's why I always like Jerry Seinfeld, because he goes, I like things. Like he does this speech he did at the Clio, these advertising awards. He got one of them. And he does this whole thing. It's so brilliant. And he goes, I like advertising because I like lying. And he talks about, he goes, if things don't make you happy, you don't have the right things. And you hear it, it's so funny, right? And people would be like, it's so disgusting. And of course, it's you know, at the end of the day, people make you happy, love makes you happy, communities, family, all that makes you happy. But when he talks about things making you happy, it's so funny and so him, and the way he sells it. The way Jerry Seinfeld sells, like, he goes, there's nothing better than a pair of Levi's, or you know, or he goes, a Volkswagen Beetle or a Bic pen. He's like, if things don't make you happy, you don't have the right things. It's so funny, and I feel like he does think a little bit like that. Yeah. Because that is a group of person, too, where they're almost spiritually connected to inanimate objects. Yeah. You know? Like, and he said this is all going to be in my new book, Soulful Materialism. But it's just funny to me because it's like, there are people you meet that when you talk to them, you go, oh yeah, like, this does mean a lot to you.
That's a very funny premise, though. That's a very good Jerry Seinfeld premise.
It's the best thing. I think his, you know, I'm not familiar with all of his comedy. His show's brilliant. Obviously, his comedy's brilliant. But that award speech I saw was like this very unique, different thing, because it does seem like he's totally raw. And I feel like that is him.
Yeah.
Like, he is being real in that moment where he's basically like, no, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the shiny thing. He goes, it doesn't matter that it doesn't work when I get it home. I want it now. He goes, I want the thing on the commercial. I want it. And there is something so deeply American about that. It is disturbing on some level. But there's also a level where you got to just recognize how powerful that stuff is, too.
So after watching that, I thought to myself, why has Jerry never gone on JRE? He's been on every other big show, but why not Rogan? Like I said, he's the most recognizable mainstream comedian. The short answer is, worlds are colliding. We're going deep now. Let's go back into time when all these Muppets were starting out. Most of the comedians we know came up through the Comedy Store in West Hollywood throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and it's still going. Back then it was owned and run by Mitzi Shore. You probably know her son, Paulie Shore, from Encino Man. So without going into a full history of the Comedy Store, here's the basic breakdown. In the 70s, it was the first all-stand-up comedy nightclub in the world. Mitzi used the place to help comedians work on material and get noticed by casting agents and talent scouts. She would handpick comedians herself that she liked, and she managed all the scheduling herself. But here's the thing. Mitzi Shore never liked Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry says himself, she disliked me instantly because I was very independent, and that's not the Comedy Store model. He said that Mitzi favored comedians who were, in his words, wounded, broken, winged birds. And that's the thing about Jerry. His stand-up has always been polished and tight, accessible. Mitzi thought he was too mainstream. He didn't have that darkness that we seem to love about comedians. You know, that deeper struggle. Listen to her son describe her and it'll make more sense.
She was so
hilarious.
funny, dude.
She was so funny.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when your mom told you were funny, it was like the greatest gift that you could ever give a comic. She came up to you and like put her hand on your arm. That was really funny.
Yeah.
You're
She
like,
never
"Holy
said that
shit."
to me.
Ah!
I had to become famous, bro, before she put me on her stage. For real, dude. I'm like, Mom, can I go on stage? These people are here to see me. You're not ready. Not happening. You got more. And she was right.
Yeah.
Because I was fucking around.
Right.
Yeah, hey, bro. Whoa. Right. You know what I mean? But she, I mean, I've been told by comedians that she was very proud. But she never said it to me. That's another thing, is she never told me she loved me.
Oh, wow.
I can't say I love you because then you wouldn't be a comic.
Oh, my God. You're a science project.
She used to lock me in the back bedroom.
I can't say I love you because then you wouldn't be a comic. Wow. She figured out a way to make you a comic.
So Jerry never played her game, and she apparently banned him from the Comedy Store. They never got along. It was only after her death that Jerry went back to the Comedy Store, and it was apparently pretty fucking wild. Listen to this.
I saw her throw a few people out of there. Ooh. I knew she threw Jerry Seinfeld out of there.
Really?
Yeah. He was on there last week. He came to the store.
Yeah, he came again. I remember the time he came in and he told his story on stage. You know, this is maybe a few years ago, but it was like, 30 years ago. He came to LA.
He was too polished for her.
Yeah.
That's what it was. He was too polished for her. She didn't want you polished.
He basically quoted her and said that it's like, you come here to LA, he's like, and no one has told you no. He's like, I want to be that person to tell you no. He's like, and he would drive down Doheny in his Porsche, and she would be out there watering the lawn, and they just kind of lock eyes. He's like, but she never would let him play. And then, this was a few years ago, and he went on stage. He said, this is my first time in a long time. Crazy. And now he went up recently, actually, within a week, right?
Fucking Jews hating Jews. It's a horror. It's a fucking horror show.
Do you think Mitzi's like strong aura built better comics at the store? It was that fear of, I better not bomb.
Yeah.
But you see, on the other hand, Joe Rogan came up through the Comedy Store. He was one of Mitzi's pet projects, basically part of the furniture. Just ask him, he'll tell you.
When he comes, his whole body just erupts.
Fuck my life, that is insufferable. So Jerry Seinfeld and Joe Rogan came from different ends of the comedy world, and their comedy couldn't be more different. Seinfeld is famous for preferring comedy without cursing. He likes it clean because he thinks that means the bits are actually inherently funny and don't rely on swearing to get a laugh, so it's just generally more accessible. And Rogan's comedy, on the other hand, is full of swearing and nasty stories and stool humping. Okay, so let's get to the punchline here. Jerry Seinfeld doesn't think Joe Rogan is funny. On his show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, Jerry makes it clear that to get on the show, he has to think that you're funny. It's basically him chatting to comedians he thinks are funny.
And here's another question. Having hosted a show of my own, do you are you looking for the personality as a guest to be the dominant influence, or do you want to be the dominant influence, or do you want to be equal?
It doesn't matter. As long as I can engage with the person. It's really amazing to me that you, who are probably even crankier than me, are able to engage. You're able to engage with almost anybody. I don't have that breadth of interactive ability. I pretty much engage with funny people or weird people or, kind of off people. Anybody who's a little normal, even just like, let's say, a normal actor or actress, I'm lost. I got nothing. I'm not curious. I'm not interested. You got a show. I don't care.
He's
I couldn't
just
even
described
fake
30 years of my life. I saw the show.
That's great.
So then, over 11 seasons, 84 episodes, he's had some of the biggest names in comedy on his show. Larry David, Ricky Gervais, Alec Baldwin, what the fuck? Bob Einstein, Sarah Silverman, David Letterman, Don Rickles, Chris Rock, Louis C.K., Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, Bill Burr, Jim Carrey, Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy, Sebastian Maniscalco. It's a who's who of the comedy world. Except no Joe Rogan. Now let's put this into perspective. Joe Rogan sells out fucking arenas. Netflix has paid him millions of dollars for his comedy specials. Forget about podcasting. Joe Rogan is right at the top of the food chain when it comes to stand-up comedy. Even if you think he's not funny, you cannot deny that he is one of the most successful stand-up comedians of all time. That is simply a fact. Yet Jerry wouldn't have him on his cringy Coffee and Cars show or whatever the fuck it's called. And look, I get it. Some of you might be thinking, who gives a fuck? Well, I think Rogan does. I think he really cares. You see, this is the thing about Joe. He's become sort of like this gatekeeper of the stand-up comedy world. If you haven't been on JRE, you haven't made it. Joe has platformed comedians and they've blown up as a result. We all know this. So here you have these two worlds colliding. Jerry Seinfeld, the biggest mainstream stand-up in history, who has completely ignored Joe Rogan, one of the most successful and highest profile stand-up comedians out there. And then Joe never having Jerry on JRE. I don't know about you, but I think that is funny as fuck. I'm a fan of JRE, but one thing I dislike about Rogan and his universe is this idea that he's become the arbiter of comedy. He launched his comedy club, The Mothership, which is great, good luck to him, but it's clear he's trying to become a modern-day Mitzi Shore. How many times have we heard Joe chatting to his comedy buddies, crapping on about the comedy brain and how they operate on a different level to the rest of us pedestrians? That shit is cringe as fuck. I literally fast-forward through those bits. And so we have these two comedy ecosystems with Seinfeld on one side and Rogan on the other side, and if they ever merged, worlds would be colliding. It could never work. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Remember, best comment gets pinned. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and become a subscriber so you can keep up to date with all my latest uploads. I'll chat to you guys soon. See you in the next one.
But if you look at the building's blown outward.
Whoa.
Like it's blown out. Now, I'm obviously not a fucking bomb expert, but I talked to one.
You should see erect.
He can't stop himself.
All right. Keep going. I need some levity.
If you look at, it did need levity. If you look at the images of the building, if you look at the images of,
I'm not a bomb expert.
You're an animal. You're a fucking animal. You can't be stopped.